Okay, assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to our Zoom for the eve, our art Zoom for the evening. Welcome, Sana. Assalamu alaikum. How are you? Can't hear you.
I'm good. I'm excited. Yeah, I look forward
Alhamdulillah.
to this.
So let me read about, let me give a little background about GAMA, inshallah, so we can get started. GAMA was founded by Abbas Muhammad in the San Francisco Bay Area in September 2016 and has since spread across North America with chapters in New York City and Detroit and with artists and community members throughout the world. GAMA's mission is to build a platform of professional support and creative liberation for Muslim artists to facilitate the growth of authentic creative communities based on inclusivity and trust, and to scale these communities throughout the world by facilitating networks of artistic collaboration. Alhamdulillah. I myself am a member of GAMA. I have been a member for the past 4 years of GAMA New York. Welcome, Sana.
Thank
So,
you. Thank you for having me.
thank you for being here, everyone. Let's open up the questions right away. Let's get started. Sana, what made you decide to enter this open call for what does liberation look like?
What made me decide? Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, the title was very striking to me. What is liberation? Because I mean, aren't we all striving to reach some sort of freedom, right? For freedom from our ego, freedom from unhappiness, depression, all that. So I mean, art is a great medium to allow ourselves to explore that freedom, I feel. And there's so many different definitions of what that can mean for every person at an
Yes.
individual level. But as an artist, I really feel it's through the pathway of the soul, through the pathway of creativity, really honestly. It's an unlimited sort of territory that you can explore that's within you. And if you tap into that side of side of you that you have total control of, it is very liberating, you know. So yeah.
Okay, that's good. That's good. My next question is, what type of art do you like to do? Take us to who you are as an artist, you feel.
What kind of art do I do? Well, you can see some of my work in the back. I do very sort of mesh of traditional Islamic calligraphy, geared very specifically with specializing in Sulu style. And I've been doing that for over 15, 20 years now. I mesh it with a lot of arabesque patterns, very traditional, but I tend to use very sort of vibrant colors within that palette. So it's kind of a mesh of very kind of bold arabesque patterns mixed with very sort of unique compositions when it comes to calligraphy. Um, Kind of combining that with sort of cosmic themes and sacred geometry and um, symbols like the shams and archetypal sort of representations of the human and things like that. So, yeah.
Okay. So let's go take a look at your art because it's very, when we were doing it, it's very, 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 very detailed. I love the way, I'm going to share my screen right now so that we can go ahead and take a look at this. Give me just a second. While we're going through this, when did you start your art practice?
When did I start my art practice? Well, I was innately always into art since I was a child. My mom's an artist. I come from a very sort of creative family. But when did I officially start? I would say when I was little, but then when I was introduced to Islamic art was kind of in my teens through a spiritual master that I happened to meet in Vancouver um, from the Naqshbandi Tariqa, and he kind of pinpointed me into trying my hand at Arabic calligraphy. And that is when I kind of started the doors of opening up to exploring that realm. started for me, and so when I really deeply got involved with art was then. But I've delved in different directions with portraits and landscapes and all sorts of just expressing my creativity in general. I've always been into that. So
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah.
yeah.
So take a look at your pieces, and as you guide us through what your mindset was, some of these titles are so amazing to me. Like this piece right here, Love Portal of Oneness.
Right.
Tell us about this piece.
Um, yeah, it's basically the portal of what connects us all is through the power of love. It's an energy that when we have it, it opens up a portal where we're able to see the oneness in all of creation. In a way, it connects us to people. It's the only energy that connects us. So yeah, it's a portal. It's got 12 points, which kind of represents time. And the green aspect is sort of the matrix that we're part of, that's contained within this sort of earthly realm, and outside of it is the universe. So tapping into that love allows us to kind of tap into the universe through the confines of the matrix, which is represented by the geometry. So
Mm.
kind of you're going beyond time and entering into that portal of love, which allows you to experience beyond time, beyond space. So yeah.
Dancing, the dancing phoenix of balance.
Yeah, this is actually, I when I represent phoenixes is kind of where I'm at in my own journey of this was in particular trusting the divine, because it incorporates hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakil, which is for God is enough for me. So it's kind of like I'm in that sort of trust, and I'm balanced within that sort of space, and I'm just, I'm dancing means that I'm allowing the divine to work through me, which is kind of where the hollow sort of heart and that comes from. It's allowing myself to kind of embrace the trust in God, and that allows me to step into this sort of dancing, sort of free spirited sort of space where I'm able to relax, or like that. So it's that kind of phoenix.
Getting the question from Medina, what drew you to Islamic art specifically?
What drew me to Islamic art? Well, I mean, it speaks for itself. The majesty and perfection found. I don't find that is apparent in any other work, any other style other than Islamic art. It was not something naturally I was drawn to because of the perfection it expressed in terms of its mastery. I've not reached that at my own self with that mastery and that level of perfection, but it always used to draw me that the beauty of it, and the geometry, and the mirror concepts, and the just in general the perfection of it, which I found it was something, if I practiced it, it would facilitate my own grounding of my own perfection. So that's mainly where the intention comes from, to go towards practicing Islamic art.
What about this one? Yin Yang Mirror Universe.
Yin Yang mirror universe. Well, I use the concept of the yin yang quite a lot in my work, periodically, depending on the different energy that I feel that are being expressed with the balancing of the masculine and feminine, the flow and geometry. This one in particular is kind of like it represents the human in kind of full balance. And that is kind of represented, the stars and the yin yangs is kind of identical to the center, are kind of fragments of they're fragments of the whole yin yang that's in the middle. So that's one person, and then the rest of them are stars that you attract in terms of other humans that are similar in terms of their light. They're like fragments of you that are joining with you to make you whole. So
Hmm.
kind of like that concept.
These are all, what's your medium with these? Like we saw but I want you to say what the medium is that you use to create these.
My medium, well, I just generally work with paper,
Mm-hmm.
um, watercolor paper. I use acrylic inks and calligraphy inks. And that's, yeah, that's basically my medium. I use dyes as well, fabric dyes for the backgrounds, occasionally like this one, and gold powder for to give it like sort of that gilded embellished look. And I'll use natural dyes like tea dye, or sometimes coffee, sometimes other types of teas like blue tea, just to kind of give it some little bit of a subtle depth when I need it. So yeah,
I
but
like that.
yeah, but not, I don't use traditional materials like, say, a lot of traditional Islamic artists will. I tend to I tend to go towards the modern sort of materials, but kind of stick in the middle, stay in the middle.
Hmm. How much of your own culture influences your work? Maya Eatman wanted to ask you that.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
How much of your own culture informs your work?
Oh,
A
okay.
question from Maya.
I think it does quite a lot. Originally I'm innately drawn to the Persian motifs, probably because of my mom's side is mainly Persian, mainly Afghani sort of background. So I tend to delve into more of those colors that are apparent in those sort of regions, Pakistan. But I have a very sort of love for Ottoman style too, with the calligraphy. So I like to incorporate every. I like to incorporate all. It's a mix of my culture, but then Ottoman, Turkish, and as well as American, kind of mixed all together. But you definitely see the Pakistani influence a little bit in my work from the motifs I choose.
So what about this one? Yin Yang Shams of Peace.
Yin Yang Shams of Peace. This one, well, this was one of my recent pieces. I tend to use the flower of life symbolism quite a lot, and this one was kind of incorporating it within the yin yang to kind of it's kind of a symbol of wholeness, but then it's hard to explain. It's like soul fragments within you that kind of become whole, and then you kind of, that dark and light aspect of you kind of are integrated in a sort of way where you become this sort of shams, because in this one there's no apparent light and dark. It's kind of all light, and then the black is kind of incorporating the shadow in a very sort of integrated way that creates the peace within you, which is kind of in the rays, is what is said in calligraphy is salam, written in a mirror form. So that kind of integration of your light and shadow in a healthy sort of way creates a sense of peace within you, a sense of wholeness, that you're able to kind of express a sort of light that's kind of very grounded, very sort of peaceful. So yeah, that's
I
kind of
really
where
love
this piece is coming from. Yeah.
Mirror Healing.
Mirror healing. Oh, this one's interesting.
This one is
Um,
very interesting. I like the color. Well, you know what? Let me let you go ahead.
what are your thoughts? Tell me.
Well, I was thinking that I really like the balance of this one. It reminded me almost of like a, a globe with two sides to balance it out.
Yeah.
In your pieces are all very balanced. All I can see the geometric forms. I can see your training almost in it. But I mean, this one really struck me as something I could see on in many circumstances.
Right, right. It's more of a traditional piece I've done. It's a it's a smaller one, but definitely it does have the balance of the. It has a nice balance, but it was mainly supposed to represent like the heaven and earth. The,
Oh,
the top pillar is kind of the heaven, and the bottom is earth, and then they're being connected through this portal of the healer. Um, so that is what it really, in essence, what it means. And the healer the Yashafi is a
Right.
divine name of God that
Right.
represents the healer. But it was interesting because it was funny because we made a typo with the Yashafi and someone said yeah shadow, and it got me kind of thinking because I was like yeah it's like when you're reflecting on your shadow is where the real healing really begins. So Yashafi is kind of a facilitator of you bringing that out and allowing God to help you find that healing or find the revelations of where you need healing. So that's why we recite these particular names.
Mhm.
But that was interesting because um, I was sitting at the doctor's office and there was a sign there that said um, that all wounds are healed through time. But the person who said it says I don't agree with that. So it was kind of like it's like Yashafi is like it's a mirror of you, which you're seeing your what you need healing with through other people that are mirrors of you. And the only way for you to really heal those wounds is kind of to see your own shadow, or you see your own sort of reflection and where you need the work, and kind of work on kind of healing those root sort of patterns of where the wound is actually coming from. So it's kind of like that, and it allows us to kind of when we reflect on that, it connects us to heaven, and so we kind of ascend in that way towards a new form of liberation within our souls through the power of healing our wounds. So
Okay.
yeah.
Ship of safety on the horizon.
You said it like a French. Yeah, this one actually was one of my original designs of the ship. It basically is kind of invoking that safety is found in following authority, following God's authority, following the prophet's authority, and following the guides, and following people who are kind of among you that are in terms of government, in terms, and following them in terms of being on the ship of safety. So in the sail says Ya ayyuhallazina amanu, which means "Oh you who believe," which is kind of like the sail is where the wind is kind of pushing the ship. It is kind of like that. Your belief level is what really will drive you to reach past the horizon, even though you don't see what is past the horizon. Your belief will take you to the next level of liberation, spiritual experience, whatever you want. So yeah.
In talking about the pieces that we had, this one got a very visceral reaction from everyone. They're like, "Oh, it's so beautiful! Oh, wow! What was her thought process with this one? What made you decide to put these together?" I mean, and the question that we keep getting over and over is, what did you decide to use these modern materials? How did you pick these colors for each piece?
Right. Well, this one is pretty. I used they're acrylic, watered down acrylic inks that I used for this
Mm,
piece, mixed with
yeah,
kind
it's
of
really
fabric
rich.
dyes. Yeah, yeah. So I like the vibrancy of acrylic, the medium. So I used it on watercolor, and then it's basically calligraphy ink that I drew on with that I wrote with a kalam, which is a traditional pen used. That's a bamboo that's cut to shape, and you write with it. So that's how I did the calligraphy.
Okay, this piece right here. Please talk about this one.
Oh yeah, this is this is actually a recent one of mine. It's actually a rendition of a very sort of old miniature painting, famous Persian miniature painting from I don't know how many centuries ago, but it was kind of my own rendition of it, more simplified interpretation. Um, so basically, it's Prophet Muhammad sitting on a buraq. It's representation of his ascension, but then it's not just and the angels are all kind of helping him ascend into heavens,
Mm-hmm.
and but it's also a representation of the personal ascension journey that we all go through in terms of overcoming our ego and riding our ego to facilitate spiritual ascension within us, and allowing, once we intend that we want to go on this journey of taskiyatul nafs, of kind of riding on our ego, and breaking through the barriers of it controlling us. We get help, we get divine help from angelic realm, and all sorts of spiritual sort of assistance comes in helping. So yeah, that's where that comes from.
Alhamdulillah. What about this one? Oops, going too far. Sorry. Questions about this one are coming very heavy.
Okay, you have
We'll talk about it after. Let's
Okay.
go to this one.
All right.
The key to oneness is essence.
Yeah, this one basically is, I represent this concept a lot of the mirroring of the who, of the essence within humans. So basically the human in us, the who man, the essence of us, aside from our gender conflicts or race conflicts and nationality and all that. Aside from that, what is the soul essence of each human being, and what makes us human is what connects us. So it's kind of like a mirror sort of form of that is a kind of key portal to entering into like this beautiful dimension when you tap into people's humanness, when you tap into their essence rather than any sort of outer form that they're portraying. That makes us separate from others. So kind of tapping into that reality creates, the infinity. There's a symbol of the infinity in the middle. So tapping into that beauty, which is that portal of the key portal.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the eye of oneness.
The eye of oneness. Yeah, this one is in particular kind of looking through the eyes of non-duality, through the eyes of beauty. The arabesque kind of symbolizes beauty. It's kind of expressing that we are what we see is kind of what we are. So whatever our perspective is going to be reflected through our eyes. It starts with our own perception of things. So clearing that and making that beautiful in any sort of way we can, helps us to see the world in a more beautiful way, and seeing the world through the eye of oneness, like seeing through, a sort of non-duality, non-judgmental sort of view. Anything that kind of makes you separate from the whole is kind of you're not in that eye of oneness sort of perspective. So that's what it represents. Yeah, mainly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for going through all of them with us. We really now, a lot of people are asking me questions, and I want to just talk about your art journey, which you did touch on a little bit more. But one of the things that we can say for you is, how did you decide to focus on being an artist? How do you balance your life?
How did I decide becoming an artist? And how do I balance that life?
Yes.
Well, artist was kind of a no-brainer for me. It was just an innate path that I just was led on, just straight from the beginning. In terms of how I balanced it with my other life, that took me some time, from being very obsessive over art to sort of following into other roles, being a mother, wife. It just naturally, I had to create a sort of balance with that. But yeah, it's challenging for us artists to because we sort of tend to have to jump around from mundane sort of life to a spiritual sort of life that comes through creativity. So kind of jumping from both portals is a little bit of a challenge, but
This is true.
Yeah.
So what spiritual or Islamic themes do you find challenging? And why do you bring that to your art? And how do you bring that to your art?
What kind of themes do I find challenging? I think mainly to sort of mesh different cultures, different religions, different sort of faiths, no faiths, kind of mixing them together in a very sort of harmonious way that appeals to everyone in sort of universal way, beyond any sort of separation constructs, you know. So that's my main aim with the work.
Alhamdulillah. So I'm going to open up the conversation because I'm getting a lot of questions and I want everyone to have a chance to speak to you directly and ask. Okay?
Sure.
So Daniel, if you please. Does anyone have questions to speak to Sana directly?
Assalamu alaikum. Excuse me. I'm very happy to see your work here, Sana. Thank you for joining us, and mashallah. I've been appreciative of your work for some time, also through just the GAMA Collective network. So, I am appreciative of this collective, this artist collective across the country, that we can all connect in this level. Just kind of stay connected, both kind of creatively and spiritually. I think it's a real blessing. So, alhamdulillah to that. But I guess my question for you is, you did mention the Naqshbandi Tariqa earlier, and if you can speak to it, if you prefer to, remain silent, I understand and respect that. But is there any I guess in-depth, like, spiritual realities to your work that are reflected from your participation in the Tariqa? And also, does your sheikh have any kind of role in that? And I also just want to acknowledge, I do respect it and appreciate your sheikh Hisham very much. I was able to meet him on a few occasions, so mashallah, may Allah bless him always. So that's my question.
Right. Yeah, no, that's an awesome question. Yeah, definitely the underlying themes that I always choose are very Naqshbandi. They're sort of geared towards the spiritual sort of ascension and the principles that come from the Tariqa sort of understanding of letting go of your ego, embracing love, in terms of Sufism, just all the principles that are within the kind of inner journey of Islam are very sort of emphasized in Naqshbandi Tariqa. So that as an artist, I really like to delve in the deeper meanings of Islamic principles. So it's definitely given me a platform to focus on. And my work has always been very spiritual. So it definitely does connect. As far as my guide, yeah, he's the one who originally got me to start Islamic art, because he just looked at me one day in a crowd and he's like, can she make posters for our Shahada posters for our Interbate event? And that was the first time I got introduced to Islamic calligraphy in general. I had no idea what it involved. I pulled out my English lettering book and tried to convert it into Arabic. That was when I originally started. He knew I always had an interest in Arabic and all that prior, but just the fact that he narrowed it down to in such a magical way for me, and it's become kind of my main focus even today. And he's always happy when I go see him. He's always happy that I've still continued with that. I've followed that path, through and through. A lot of things spiritually opened for me as I stuck with it, which I realized that now that I see the wisdoms in it, may have been hard at that time to understand, but that's the power of spiritual guides. They lead you in a direction. They see your full potential unfolding at the end of the horizon. You don't see it yet, but they do. But it's a matter of you trusting, like this phoenix. Yeah. It's like you trust, and just dance the dance, and you'll float. You'll float through. And subhanallah, I've had so many openings happen in regards to my artistic path continuously, and I'm just blown away even up to this point. It's been like 10-15 years since I started, and I'm still blown away by all the openings, so definitely I have a spiritual sort of support behind me. I always feel that.
Alhamdulillah, that's something that we were talking about earlier,
Yeah.
right? Like there would be something that will happen that reminds you that you're, you know, this is what you're here to do. Alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
Nasreen has a question. Do you recommend any prerequisites that one should learn or sort out in order to begin their Islamic art journey?
Prerequisites. No, I think it's if you have an innate sort of draw to it in terms of any sort of in terms of love and passion. I think definitely go for it. It's definitely something to worth pursuing. Just the practice of Islamic art. I love the effect that it has on the human of kind of making you focus on perfection, which kind of rubs off on you as you practice it. So I definitely feel that effect in terms of opening up deeper realities within our soul through the power of Islamic art, because it incorporates geometry, incorporates a holy word, a divine word, in terms of light codes. It opens up a lot if you really want to focus on a type of art form that you spiritually want to grow from. It's definitely one of those types of art, you know. So definitely I'll be all for it if you wanted to try it.
That's really good.
Yeah.
Maya Eatman is on the line. Go ahead, Maya. Assalamu alaikum, Maya. Are you there?
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Yeah, we got a video. That's nice.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. People I do not know. I have a question. So I did type it over here in the Zoom group chat. So I'll read it from there. What is your process? Meaning, how do you make your work? And what other artists do you look at? And I guess I would add to that, do you just consider your work art, or do you just exclusively consider it Islamic art? Thank you.
Oh, there's a lot of different questions. Hopefully I can answer all three. Yeah, definitely. I mean, answer your last one. Definitely, it is Islamic art, but it's meant to represent art in general. Definitely, that is where the principle of my work definitely comes from. This kind of meshing creativity in sort of very artistic ways that kind of brings out my own sense of expression and soul and kind of individual journey as I'm going along. So, in terms of that, definitely represents art in general, not just Islamic art, but my process in terms of how I come up with my themes are very sort of they're very mystical at times. A lot of the images come from dreams. Some of them come, you can say, as visions. Some of them come as synchronicity, sort of from my environment where I'm picking up on a certain symbol so many times that I've jotted down. A lot of the Arabic that I choose, the phrases I choose, are meant for uplifting me in my personal journey at the time. Which is why I kind of choose sort of trust the divine, sort of love, sort of themes that are surrounding uplifting in spiritually. So in terms of that, the process of how I choose my ideas, that's what it would be. And what else? What else did you ask?
What other artists do you look at? I guess I'm asking mostly about contemporary art, but you know, what other artists you check out?
Well, I've always, as a child, since when I started traditional Islamic calligraphy and art, I used to always very diligently study the masters that were good at it. So I have a knack for really paying attention to subtleties when it comes to the way compositions were made. So I tended to learn, I was mainly self-taught, where I tended to learn from observation and sort of awareness from my part to notice certain subtleties within forms. I've always had this sort of innate sort of ability to do that, which allowed me as a self-taught artist to kind of progress, kind of mainly from my own presence and love for it. I did have a teacher for briefly, whose work I really admired, by the name of Muhammad Zakaria. He's a traditional Islamic calligrapher. So I did study with him for about 1.5 to 2 years, to kind of pick up on some subtleties that I was missing, that I couldn't learn, or some, you could say, blind spots that I wasn't able to pick up. So I did learn from him. And as far as any artists I look Up to not in particular. I tend to admire many artists, just kind of anybody who's expressing new levels of creativity and kind of in, originality and just love in their art, which you can usually tell by the energy and the energy of the work. So yeah, I'm all for all sorts of art, really.
Shukran.
Oh, you're welcome.
Anyone else have any questions for her?
Hi, Sana. Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Walaikum salam. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Yes. So you did mention a lot about your individual growth and how it had opened doors for you. Can you speak more about that? How you see yourself in your art, or if you do see yourself or not? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I think I would say overall, each piece does represent me in some sort of way or my sort of spiritual reflection at the time. It definitely connects with me in a lot of ways. There's a lot of archetypal symbols I use, such as the phoenix in my work, which is very sort of Jungian. It's kind of combining this sort of Islamic art with archetypal sort of symbolism through psychology and sort of that sort of realm. So the phoenix actually is depicted a lot in my work. The yin yang is very depicted in my work. Yeah, it's hard to explain. It's just the symbolism of the phoenix stands very strongly for me because when different layers of my own spiritual journey that I've had to go through to kind of let go of certain aspects of my ego. The phoenix played strong during those times, so it was kind of a symbol that kind of allowed me kind of to form. It gave me the energy to find strength in letting go of certain aspects of my ego. In art in general has done that for me, but in terms of the Shams symbolism, that also plays within kind of in relation to my name being Sana with the sun in it. I've always connected with the sun symbol since I was a child. The Shams, that it's generally a very powerful symbol within Islamic art as well. You'll find it in all sorts of little spaces within Islamic art or as bigger motifs. Um, just that representation of light, I find is very powerful to connect with your own light when you feel like you're going kind of entering into a dark space. I find painting, say, a shams or a sun really kind of empowers you to come back into that space. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's a very empowering sort of art. It's very, you know, it's so I like to kind of reflect the highest reality of myself and portray it in the work, and then hopefully inspire others to look at that within themselves. So yeah.
I like
That's
that.
great. And
Yeah, I like that a lot.
how do you like talk, how would you like, or do you already like talk to those who are inspired by your work? Like, do you delve deeper into the subjects, or you know, because it's like when someone's inspired by your work, that could like lead to other conversations and other, you know, the depth of the conversation. So how do you, or how would you like to continue that with someone who is inspired by your work?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I've always connected with people through the power of art. That's just been my way of communicating, and connecting with others generally. So I generally find I don't connect with people that are not into my art. It's just a little bit of a distance I feel, in terms of my own relationships. But um, yeah, I don't know. What do you mean? Can you ask me a little in more detail where you're trying to go with it, with the question?
I'm sorry, it's a little confusing,
No,
but
it's okay. I'm trying to think
so
more
for
personally.
example, let's say like I really like your piece with the ship, It does
Right.
speak to so much inspiration, especially if somebody is like, when I saw it, it kind of meant like, you know, like, wow, this is something that could uplift me if I'm feeling down. Because it's like, to me, I saw it like a savior sort of piece. And
Mm-hmm.
so, like, if that was my feelings, how would you converse with me about that feeling and what you're you know, saying within the piece? Like, how would you
Right.
take that
Right.
to the next level to inspire those who are
Yeah.
inspired by your work?
Yeah. I mean, that's why I usually tend to stick with universal sort of symbols, very powerful symbols such as the horizon kind of represents that spiritual journey, that unknown spiritual journey that you're on. And the ship is kind of, the ship of safety is what it's called, is kind of a representation of you following people who know more than you as your means to reach higher realities. So if that means if you're
Hmm.
following, say, a guide like I do personally,
Hmm.
um, it allows you to kind of trust them, kind of trust a higher power, which is what the ship represents, right? It's like you're floating on water, right? There's something higher than you that's allowing you to float above the water and not sink, just like Noah's Ark. It was you're learning how to trust other than yourself in a higher power. So that's mainly what it represents.
Hmm.
Kind of universal themes that we cannot deny that are there. um, this power of, say a god, is a power of gods, power of a higher sort of presence. A lot of my underlying theme of my work and energy is kind of put into that direction to show that as much as I can, this sort of higher presence. So the ship
Hmm.
definitely does that. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, mashallah.
Yeah.
I definitely got that from your pieces, and that always your work brings me back to a certain spirituality, which is why I'm always trying to allude to that question. Like, how does your spirituality connect with your Islamic art? How did you choose that journey? Because even in hearing you speak about it, you're always talking about a higher power and you're having a calling. How do you feel that that all connects to your artwork?
How does that connect? Well, I think I guess that's my sense of purpose. I feel really strongly that me as an artist, it's not just me painting anything. I really feel my personal journey is to express that higher creator in my work, the higher cosmic presence, in terms of if I reflect on all my pieces, yeah, definitely. I mean, it all points to the divine in some sort of way, to kind of help facilitate our spiritual ascension, our liberation through the power of divine word, through the power of, being helped by something greater than ourselves. It's like getting out of that sort of realm that we can do it on our own. We even can't reach liberation on our own. It has to be through the power of a higher being. So, when you invoke certain divine names, you invoke certain holy words, it's kind of all kind of allowing you to acknowledge that. And, I just want the artwork itself to be a reminder of that we need, that we are the creation and there's a creator. And, um, just to kind of delve in that beauty of that divine sort of space that allows us to ascend outside of our ego in a more of a beautiful space.
I got a good question from a participant that's asking, do you like explaining your art, or do you like people to just look at it and then, get from it the meaning that they get from it, or for them
Right.
to interpret it themselves?
Right. I mean, I definitely have my own interpretations of the work when I'm in that space and creating it. So I do have my own specific interpretations, but I realize that that's very much my own specific journey that I'm going through at the time. Other people, the way, so I like to leave it open, and I've done this more and more over the years, to leave it open for the viewer to interpret, because they're coming from a different lens. They have a different experience they're attaching to it and seeing something completely different that when I engage with, I said, like how Medina is saying, that when we engage in conversation with others who see the work, you have a totally different interpretation and understanding, which opens your understanding through the
Yes,
power of art. So
that
it's
definitely happens.
yeah, it's definitely very powerful. It's a very sort of perspective breaker when it comes to, you know, using art as that medium to break perspective is very powerful, I feel. And that's, I think, the most thing that I enjoy is seeing other people's what it means to them, because it's, yeah, and I love it to be personal to everyone, you know, art should be.
Art is definitely personal to everybody. And one of the questions that I always ask everyone that, you know, we've been interviewing, because I find it really interesting, is what is your process like? What inspires you to go ahead and create these pieces? Because although, as you say, they all represent liberation for you, what made you decide to create them in the first place? Like, how does your art, like, for some people it's visceral, where they see something and they're sparked, or they hear something, sometimes it's music. What gives you that drive to create a piece?
Hmm. Well, you know, I'm a big believer in that what I create, it manifests, and I've been told this by my guide as well. Originally, when I had made that poster for him at the event, he said, what he said to me, he's like, if you criticize the creator, it's like you're criticizing the creation. And he was looking directly at me, and he was referring to a poster I had in the back, which was a shahada, which I had actually made a lot of Arabic errors in it, which he didn't say anything about. But anyways, this is the mercy of a guide. But the fact that he said that, it stuck with me throughout the years, and it allowed me to open to this belief and this power that what you create manifests in the physical. And I literally took that as a very strong belief of mine, and it was only strengthened over the miraculous unfoldings that came with each piece that I experienced personally and people around me. And it was something that my eyes were open to this reality that what I'm creating is actually coming true. It's coming to life in some sort of way in a magical land, through the portal of creativity. And I'm manifesting what I'm painting, which was so powerful for me that it totally delved me in a whole other sort of realm of doing the work. It became very real to me. It wasn't something I was just doing. I was experiencing it, and you know, had this belief that everyone around me was experiencing it because I was creating it. But it was more to do with syncing with divine power. It's kind of like that psychic energy. You're syncing with the universal flow. That's what artists do. They create from that space that has no time and space. That's, you know, manifesting. So we tap into that space, you know.
Yes. And speaking about manifestation of your creations, do you feel like they come through you or they come to you?
uh do they come through me or do they come to you? A lot of times they come, that's a good question. A lot of times they come through me, um as a vessel, but a lot of times they come from outside of me. So I'd say it would be balanced, because yeah, definitely. There's certain aspects that have been part of me through my experience that I incorporate in the work, regarding the color choices, the arabesque, all that stuff kind of falls in from my innate understanding of how creativity and color theory and all this stuff works. But then a lot of the signs I get from the outside, and it can come from anybody around me. It can come through any sort of symbolism, you know. So definitely both, I would say, equally. Yeah.
Mm. So these pieces that you created, what would you say represents liberation the most for you?
uh what would I say represents liberation? um I think all of them do equally, but probably the one that's right in front of me is the love portal.
Mm.
um the love portal of oneness, kind of seeing through the eyes of love, is kind of allows you to reach true freedom, you know, as long as we tend to delve into any sort of other emotions, which is hard to transmute, obviously, because we're human. But I think the goal is seeing through the portal of love. And then you'll notice that there's a who mirror who also within the portal in this particular piece too, of really getting down to the essence of a human being, as the core principle of what everyone should focus on. um you know, so that, you know, so there's so there's kind of that principle going on as well outside of the love, the love principle. But yeah, just kind of and that's kind of the theme that's developing over the over within life right now as well, in current times too. It's kind of looking beyond form, looking beyond color, looking beyond you know, differences, even with gender. Like that's why with even with the yin yang is part of the whole theme, is kind of seeing the masculine and feminine within you, kind of getting past those gender sort of limitations we may have, that we've kind of created. They're not really originally there. There's a lot of things that we've learned that we tend to express, which I'm kind of, with the art, I'm trying to strip the person to kind of look at just the perfection and the essence of the matter, rather than anything learned, anything kind of that's shaped our understanding, kind of just going to the truth of it. So that's kind of the vibe that all my work tends to have, you know.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I see that. It's like a flow, which I like. I liked a lot. Like even in looking at the pieces, we really enjoyed. We saw your enjoyment in terms of making them. Actually,
Right,
yeah,
right.
it
Yeah.
was
I mean, it's a
amazing.
spiritual experience for me
Yes, yes,
to make them. You can see how detailed there are. So definitely, it's definitely when I tap into the meditation space for myself. You know, it's probably sometimes the only time I get to meditate is when I'm
yes,
sitting down at my desk and working
yeah.
on pieces.
As artists, as women, as Muslims, as wives, you know, as anyone being partnered, we understand, like it's like that's something we were talking about. Like you give yourself permission, sort of, to create you certain things, and you know, I wanted this open call to do that. But how do you feel like Corona has it affected your work at all? The Corona
The Corona?
shutdown.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, I think I fall in that category of artists that some of those artists, you know, that didn't know what was happening because we were always so secluded and into our work anyway.
Yes.
So what was going on around us didn't really make much of a difference. I was definitely in that space at the time. I was like, oh, everybody's becoming like me now. That's great. Like, you know, I felt like that. So because
Yeah.
I'm always in my room and isolating myself anyways. So I definitely had the training prior. I did not feel that I was isolated in any sort of way because I felt that it was already open to me through the richness of my own creativity to enjoy my own company when it comes to
Oh,
being an artist.
mashallah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I never felt that I was lonely, definitely. And it allowed me to kind of express themes to motivate others, I guess, around me,
Yeah.
um, to kind of tap into their own richness, to tap into their own universe, and not look outside so much for happiness, because it kind of the Corona sort of environment kind of, you know, put a damper on that kind of. So kind of lifting the veils from ourselves in terms of how we seek validation, how we connect with others, but kind of connecting with ourselves first before, and allowing that sort of richness to develop enough so we can see others, aside from the outside that's happening. And kind of the Corona kind of created that exact environment for us to look within first, more and more,
Definitely.
which as
Definitely.
artists kind of naturally do. So it's kind
So
of making an artist out of everyone in a
yeah,
sense, if you really
it
looked at it.
it
The
makes you
whole Corona.
challenge yourself. Definitely. Some people felt challenged, some people felt stagnated. It definitely took, I mean, even, you know, on almost a roller coaster ride, so many different factions of what's happening in the world. As artists, we speak to that. And my last question before I open it up again is going to be, where are you going with your art now? Like, what's going on with your work now? Are these pieces are you displaying these pieces anywhere? Are you creating any shows to be publicized? Are your work selling anywhere? What's happening?
Yeah.
It's time for the shameless plug. It's time for the shameless plug of your work.
Right. I mean, I definitely enjoy showing the work. That's part of me that I've actually developed over the years. I did not have that prior. I used to be someone who would just create work and just kind of keep it to myself. But social media has kind of given me an outlet to show it as kind of in a very sort of live way whenever the energy is right. In terms of showing, I don't I've always wanted to display. I've displayed in many art shows over the years. I've been part of the Islamic Art Society for many years now, which we originally started, a few of us. So that's become big, but that's also online this year. It's an actual festival that happens in Houston, Texas every year around November, but we're doing it online, so it's going to have live sort of events happening. So we definitely have to get used to the whole digital expression for now,
Yeah.
which is actually fine with me. If you look at the wisdoms in it, you're not restricted to time, and you're not restricted to space and where you're from, like how we're connecting from all sorts of cities right now, all across the world. Like one of my friends from London, I mean, that wouldn't have not been possible, this sort of conversation, any other way if it wasn't for Corona. So there are a lot of benefits to this circumstance we are in. It's definitely connecting people of similar sort of soul together, that you couldn't have done locally.
Yes, that's
So
definitely true.
so yeah, it gives you a greater audience, definitely. So I'm looking forward to seeing where the digital sort of world takes us artists.
It's definitely an interesting connection because it's good, but it's forced. So it's like weird, like, are we happy about this? Or, is it frustrating for some people? Because as artists, you are kind of singularly working most of the time. And then having to be confined, completely confined, and
Right.
was really is challenging. But then you are right, in this digital age, this is a way for us to connect with everyone. Like we have Eileena, like from Pakistan, like we had different artists from all over that we're able to connect with like this. So that is the silver lining in this whole circumstance, alhamdulillah.
Right. And I think part of becoming a true artist, you do have to be confined somewhat. It is, I think, a prerequisite of you have to be in that space to really create work that's deep enough to make a difference. Like artists generally have that role of tapping into very deep areas that other people may not be prone to pay attention to. So we generally, as artists, are put into very sort of confined. I know with myself, as living with rheumatoid arthritis since I was a child, I was put into very sort of secluded sort of circumstances to bring this sort of creativity out of me. So that seclusion phase. So I feel like a lot of us have prior gone through that sort of training of seclusion that others now kind of are trying to get used to now with the Corona environment. It's kind of putting everyone sort of kind of cracking people open. It's almost through the power of confinement. You'll be surprised what that does. It's something that spiritual guides make the disciplines do in terms of, making them progress. It's definitely so if you look at it from there's definitely some sort of cracking open going on with terms
Definitely.
of us tapping into our own richness. I don't know,
Definitely.
spirituality.
Maya has another question. I'm going to just read for her. What are the sizes of your work and what kind of brushes or pens do you use? Maya is an artist that is amazing, I need to
Oh
say.
yeah.
And yes, Ya Allah, yes, I have done many a show with her, and I'm very proud to say she's an artist. She's very technical, however, so this is her usual. You go ahead, Maya. I know what kind of brushes are used, exactly what kind of paper she needs it. She needs it. She needs it. Feed us.
Yeah, well, I'm working on a new piece. I'll show it to you guys. It's kind of similar to this love portal, but it's got the same theme going on with the Who. But it's generally a very sort of thick watercolor paper I use, heavy grade. And in terms of In terms of what I write with, I mean, you've probably seen the traditional kalam. These I've got from Pakistan, so very kind of rugged bamboo. I use a lot of inks like this, like just kind of contemporary sort of materials like acrylic inks and gold mica powders, such as this. For building.
Maya's eyebrows are going up. She approves.
Right. And yeah, brushes. Yeah, just kind of any sort of fine brushes. I usually use these are my favorites to kind of outline with. I know a lot of traditional Islamic artists will use ink kind of dipped in, but I'm more of a contemporary sort of artist, so I like to use easier sort of materials just to speed up the process. I've always been into speeding up the process with using ready-made materials. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Are we pleased, Maya? Are we pleased? Okay, we can close it out on that. Alhamdulillah. Maya needed to know. She's definitely a person. That's my technical person. I actually ask her questions sometimes. Like,
oh, that's great. I would love to know.
Yeah.
Maybe we can contact. I can
definitely have to make that happen, Maya. You should put your
does.
contact information in the booth. She's definitely one to know because this is so awesome for us. Alhamdulillah. I'm going to close it out now because we're a little bit past 8. And I want to thank Sana, alhamdulillah, for sharing with us her process and her perspective. Everyone is saying thank you. Inshallah, please go to her site on Instagram, which we put in the chat box for everyone to see and come across. And inshallah, join us next week for our next artist. Assalamu alaikum.